The host stand at Ciel Blanc, the white sky, was a fortress of polished marble and unspoken judgments. Behind it stood Chloe, a woman whose smile was as rehearsed and cold as the restaurant's minimalist decor. It was a Saturday night. The dining room a symphony of clinking crystal and the low hum of the city's elite. Through the heavy oak doors walked a couple in their late 30s. Julian, tall and broad-shouldered, wore a well-tailored blazer that spoke of quiet confidence, not loud wealth. His wife, Lena, moved with graceful poise, her vibrant dreadlocks piled elegantly atop her head, her dress a splash of intelligent color in a sea of neutral tones. They approached the stand. "Good evening," Julian said, his voice warm. "Reservation for 2 under Bishop." Chloe's smile didn't reach her eyes. Her manicured fingers scrolled down the tablet screen once, twice, a third time with deliberate slowness. "I'm sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "I don't see a bishop for tonight. Are you sure you have the correct date?" "Positive," Lena replied, her tone still pleasant but firm. "It was confirmed yesterday. 8 o'clock for 2. Chloe gave a theatrical sigh of inconvenience. "We are fully committed, as you can see." She gestured to the bustling, packed dining room. Perhaps there was a system error. These things happen with third-party booking sites. We only guarantee reservations made directly with us. "We did make it directly with you," Julian clarified, a slight edge entering his voice. "I spoke to a manager named Antoine." "Antoine isn't in tonight," Chloe said, her finality a brick wall. "I'm afraid without the reservation in my system, there's nothing I can do. The bar might have space, but there's a dress code." Her eyes flickered over them, a subtle but unmistakable scan that took in Julian's locks and Lena's colorful dress, mentally marking them as other. The couple exchanged a look, a silent, weary conversation born from a lifetime of such microaggressions. This wasn't a simple mistake. It was a pattern. Just then, a boisterous group of 4, all white, approached the stand. "Hi, we're a bit early for our 8:30, the man said, his voice booming with assurance. Chloe's demeanor transformed. She became effusive, warm. "Of course. Your table is just being prepared. Can I get you a complimentary glass of champagne at the bar while you wait?" The message was as clear as the glass in her hand. "Asterisk, you belong." "They do not asterisk." Lena's politeness evaporated. "So, you have no room for our confirmed 8 o'clock reservation, but you can accommodate their early 8:30? Chloe's icy composure tightened. "As I said, their reservation is in the system. Yours is not. Now, if you're going to cause a scene, I will have to ask you to leave." It was a final straw. The public dismissal, the accusation of being the problem. Julian placed a calming hand on Lena's arm. He pulled out his phone, pulled up the confirmation email, and held it up for Chloe to see. The proof was undeniable. Date, time, confirmation number. Chloe's face tightened, a faint blush of irritation coloring her neck. She had been caught. Well, it seems there was an oversight. The word was a venomous substitute for lie. "Your table isn't quite ready. It will be another 20 minutes. You can wait at the bar." She gestured dismissively towards 2 cramped, wobbly stools at the far end of the bar, directly next to the service entrance where waitstaff constantly bustled in and out, a world away from the plush lounges where the other group was being seated. They took the seats, the humiliation a bitter taste. They ordered drinks, and they waited. 20 minutes came and went, then 30. They watched as party after party, who had arrived after them, were ushered to their tables. Finally, a server approached. His name tag read Kyle. He was young, with a carefully sculpted nonchalance and a smirk that seemed permanently etched on his face. "All right, follow me," he said, not making eye contact, already turning away as if there were an errand he needed to run. He led them not into the main, glittering dining room, but to a small, cramped table shoved directly beside the swinging kitchen doors. With every swing, a blast of heat, noise, and the smell of greasy dishwater washed over them. It was, without a doubt, the worst table in the entire restaurant. Julian remained calm. "Excuse me, Kyle. Could we possibly have a different table? Perhaps one of the booths along the wall?" Kyle let out a short, derisive laugh. "Those are for our regulars." Look, you wanted a table, you got a table. You gonna take it or not? There's people waiting. The choice was a classic tactic. Accept the indignity or be labeled difficult and leave. We'll take it, Lena said, her voice dangerously quiet. They sat. The temperature at their table was a good 10 degrees warmer than the rest of the room. Kyle slapped down 2 menus and vanished back through the kitchen doors without another word. 10 more minutes passed. No water. No offer of the bread basket other tables were receiving. They were being ignored, rendered invisible. Finally, Kyle reappeared, his notepad in hand, his body angled away from them as if he couldn't bear to face them directly. You ready to order, or you need more time to figure it out? He asked, his tone implying the menu was perhaps too complex for them. Julian looked up, his eyes, for the first time, holding a glint of something other than patience. It was the cool, analytical gaze of a professional assessor. We're ready, Julian said. But first, a question. What is your protocol for sanitizing ice machine wells? Kyle blinked. What? And your dishwashing machine, Lena added, her voice clear and carrying. When was the last time you calibrated the thermostats to ensure a minimum 180-degree final rinse? I noticed a film on our water glasses. Kyle's smirk finally faltered, replaced by confusion. Who are you people? Julian reached into his inner blazer pocket. He didn't pull out a wallet. He produced 2 slim, official-looking leather cases. He flipped them open, revealing gleaming badges and state-issued identification. I'm Senior Health Inspector Julian Bishop, he said, his voice now projecting authority. Cutting to the dining room's murmur. This is my partner, Inspector Lena Bishop. And this, Kyle, is now an active, unannounced compliance inspection of Ciel Blanc. You can start by bringing us your manager. And the logbooks. All of them. Kyle stood frozen, his face a perfect portrait of dawning, abject horror. The color drained from his face. He had not just insulted the black couple. He had provoked a storm. The air around their wretched table by the kitchen doors seemed to crackle with a new energy. Kyle stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, the color completely gone from his face. The smirk that seemed permanently tattooed on his lips had vanished, replaced by the twitching panic of a man who just realized he'd set his own career on fire. The manager, he stammered, his voice a full octave higher. Now, Julian said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. It was no longer the voice of a patient customer. It was a calm, implacable voice of the law. Kyle scurried away like a startled insect, disappearing through the swinging doors. The few nearby diners who had overheard the exchange were now staring openly, their forks suspended midair. The news began to ripple through the dining room in excited, hushed whispers. Within 60 seconds, a flustered man in a too-tight suit burst out of the kitchen. This was Eric, the night manager, his forehead already glistening with sweat. He attempted a smile that was a grotesque parody of hospitality. Inspectors, what an unexpected honor. Kyle here says there's been some misunderstanding. Please, let's move you to our best booth. On the house, of course, a bottle of our finest champagne. Lena held up a hand, silencing him. We're fine right here, mister. Eric Dobbs. But really, this table is unacceptable for officials of your. It's the table we were given, Julian interjected, his gaze steady, and it provides an excellent vantage point. Now, as per State Health Code 7 to 102.11, we require immediate access to your food safety certification records, pest control logs for the last 90 days, and all employee health policy acknowledgments. Eric's smile finally shattered. He nodded frantically. Of course. Right away. Kyle, don't just stand there. Get the binders from my office. As Kyle fled, Julian and Lena stood in unison. They each retrieved sleek digital tablets from their bags. The casual diners were gone. They were now in their professional element. While we wait, Lena said, her eyes scanning the bustling dining room, we'll begin our preliminary walkthrough. They moved with a quiet, deliberate purpose, ignoring Eric's frantic attempts to guide them. They didn't head for the kitchen yet. Instead, they went to the server stations. Lena ran a finger along the ice machine lid, her finger coming away with a grimy residue. Improper sealing. Potential for cross-contamination, she noted aloud. Her voice clear as she spoke into a recorder on her tablet. Julian photographed a bus tub where clean silverware was resting in a bin that had visible food debris. At the bar, Julian watched the bartender make a drink, handle the cash, and then immediately begin garnishing another cocktail without changing his gloves. Observed employee handling ready-to-eat food with soiled gloves, he stated calmly. The bartender freezing mid-squeeze of a lime wedge. They were a whirlwind of quiet, devastating efficiency, with each violation noted. Eric seemed to shrink, his assurances becoming more desperate. We'll retrain. Immediately. Kyle returned, arms laden with binders. His hands were shaking as he handed them over. Julian took the top one, the employee health log. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the pages. According to this, Julian said, his voice dropping, your server, Kyle, called in sick with gastrointestinal symptoms 3 days ago. The policy requires a 24-hour symptom-free period before returning to handle food. He looked up at Kyle, who was now visibly ill. You returned to work the next day. It was just a headache, Kyle whispered. The log says vomiting, Julian corrected, his voice like steel. Just then, their focus shifted. A server emerged from the kitchen carrying a towering, decadent chocolate cake for a birthday celebration. But Lena's eyes weren't on the cake. They were on the server's hands. On the thumb, clearly visible, pressed into the side of the frosting, was a bright blue bandage. Stop, Lena commanded, her voice cutting through the celebratory singing. The entire section went silent. Do not set that down. The server froze, terrified. Your glove is compromised, Lena said, pointing to bandage. You have directly contaminated ready-to-eat food with non-impermeable bandage. That is an automatic critical violation. She turned to Eric. This item is to be discarded immediately, and I need to see your first aid kit and your protocol for wound coverage. Now! It was a circus of failure, and Julian and Lena were the unimpressed ringmasters. They had dismantled the restaurant's facade of excellence in under 15 minutes, without even stepping into the kitchen. Finally, Julian turned to Eric. Now we inspect the kitchen. The color drained from Eric's face once more. The kitchen was the heart of the operation, and he knew it was where the real secrets and the real filth were kept. Of course, he squeaked. Right this way. He led them to the swinging doors. As Julian pushed them open, the blast of heat and noise was intense. The kitchen crew, a well-oiled machine moments before, stuttered to a hesitant stop as they saw the manager leading in 2 intense, badge-wearing strangers with tablets. Julian's sharp eyes scanned the scene, taking in controlled chaos. And then they landed on the head chef, a large, imposing man with a thick beard and a furious scowl, who was staring right back at them with undisguised hostility. This was Chef Marco, and he did not look like a man who was afraid of health inspectors. The kitchen of Ciel Blanc was a world away from its serene dining room. The air was thick with the clatter of pans, the hiss of steam, and the frantic energy of a Saturday night service. As Julian and Lena stepped through the swinging doors, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The crew's efficient rhythm faltered, their eyes darting between the inspectors and their furious chef. Chef Marco stood anchored at the pass, his massive arms crossed over his stained whites. He didn't look nervous. He looked enraged. His gaze was a physical force, fixed on Julian and Lena with pure, undiluted contempt. Eric, the manager, wrung his hands. Chef, these are... I know who they are. Marco's voice was a low growl, cutting to the kitchen noise. He made no move to welcome them. You got a problem, you talk to me. Julian met his stare without flinching. We're conducting a routine inspection. Chef, we'll need unrestricted access. Routine. Marco let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. You think I'm stupid? You sat in my dining room, got your feelings hurt, and now you're here to flex your little government power. This is a harassment. Lena ignored him, her focus already on her surroundings. She moved to the first stainless steel preparation table. She pulled a digital thermometer from her kit. Let's start with your cold-holding units. She opened a low-boy refrigerator filled with delicate sauces and pre-portioned proteins. She inserted the probe into a container of hollandaise. The digital readout flashed. 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Hollandaise sauce, a time temperature control for safety food, holding at 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Lena stated clearly into a recorder, well above the 41-degree maximum. Critical violation. A young saucier paled. I just pulled that out to... It doesn't matter when you pulled it out, Julian interjected, his voice calm but firm. It matters what the temperature is at the moment of inspection. It must be discarded. Marco's face flushed a deeper red. That sauce is perfect. You're wasting food. Julian moved to the grill station. He watched the cook handle raw chicken breasts and then, without washing his hands or changing his gloves, reached for a bin of pre-cooked roasted potatoes. Observe cross-contamination, Julian noted, capturing it on his tablet's camera. Employee handled raw poultry and then ready-to-eat food without changing gloves or washing hands. Critical violation. The cook froze, looking like a deer in headlights. This was a pattern. For every step the inspectors took, they found a critical failure. They found a container of raw chicken stored above a tray of fresh lettuce. They found a cracked cutting board with deep grooves that housed visible old food debris. They found a slicer that had clearly not been broken down and cleaned, grease and dried meat clinging to its mechanisms. With each violation, Chef Marco's fury grew. He didn't instruct his staff to correct the issues. He just watched, his jaw clenched, a storm gathering behind his eyes. Then Lena approached the dry storage area. She scanned the shelves of flour, grains, and canned goods. Her eyes, trained to see what others missed, caught a small, dark pellet near a sack of rice. Then another. She bent down, using a tweezers from her kit to pick one up, placing it in a clear evidence bag. Rodent excrement, she announced, her voice cold. In dry storage. Critical violation. That was the final straw for Marco. He slammed his hand down on a counter, making a stack of plates rattle. Enough. This is a setup. You planted that. Julian turned to face him fully, the full weight of his authority in his gaze. Are you accusing a state health inspector of fabricating evidence, Chef? That is a very serious allegation. I'm accusing you of having a vendetta. Marco roared, stepping forward, his bulk intimidating. You came in here looking for trouble because my waiter hurt your pride. Well, you found it. Now get out of my kitchen. The entire kitchen had gone silent. Every cook, every dishwasher was watching the standoff. We are not finished, Julian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. We haven't even gotten to the dish pit or the walk-in cooler. This inspection will be completed. Marco took another step, now just a few feet from Julian. The threat was implicit. I said, get out. For a moment, the two men stood toe-to-toe, the air between them crackling with tension. The possibility of physical violence suddenly felt very real. It was Lena who broke the stalemate. She had moved away during the confrontation, her attention caught by the massive, industrial dishwasher. She had opened the service panel, her flashlight probing the machine's inner workings. Julian, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. You need to see this. Julian held Marco's glare for a second longer before turning to join her. Lena pointed her flashlight at the machine's internal thermostat sensor. It was crudely bypassed with a piece of twisted wire, holding the contacts together permanently. This machine is rigged, Lena said, her voice loud enough for the whole kitchen to hear. The final rinse thermostat is being forced to read 180 degrees. It's not actually reaching that temperature. The dishes are not being sanitized. They're just being washed in hot, dirty water. The revelation was catastrophic. It meant every plate, every fork, every glass that left this kitchen was potentially contaminated. The silence in the kitchen was now absolute, broken only by the hum of the compromised machine. Julian turned slowly back to Chef Marco and manager Eric. Eric looked like he was going to be sick. Marco's fury had been replaced by something else, a cold, calculating shock. This is no longer just a list of violations, Julian said, his voice echoing in the silent room. This is evidence of deliberate, systemic fraud and a willful endangerment of public health. This inspection is now a formal investigation. He looked from Marco's stunned face to Eric's terrified one. And the two of you have some very serious questions to answer. The word investigation seemed to suck all the air out of the kitchen. The staff, who had been frozen spectators, now began to look like trapped animals, their eyes darting toward the exits. The gravity of the situation, criminal charges, not just fines, settled over them. Julian didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His command was absolute. Nobody touches anything. No one leaves. This kitchen is now an active crime scene. He looked at Eric, whose entire body was trembling. Mr. Dobbs, you will lock the main service doors. Now. As Eric scurried to obey, Julian called a non-emergency line for the police, requesting officers for a scene stabilization and potential evidence seizure. Lena was already on her tablet, filing the preliminary report that would trigger an emergency suspension of their operating license. Chef Marco stood by the rigged dishwasher, his earlier bravado gone, replaced by a sheen of cold sweat. He watched his empire of stainless steel and fire crumble around him. But a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. "You've ruined me," he whispered, the words thick with venomous disbelief. "You did that yourself," Lena replied, not looking up from her tablet. "You chose to bypass safety for speed. You chose to serve filth on fine china." The dining room, sensing the cataclysm in the kitchen, had grown restless. The murmur of concerned diners was audible through the doors. Chloe, the hostess, pushed through, her face a mask of panic. "Eric, there are people asking for their checks. They're getting angry. What's going?" Her words died in her throat as she took in the scene. The grim inspectors, the terrified staff, the look of utter defeat on the manager's face. Just then, Kyle, the waiter, made a break for it. He dropped his apron and bolted for the back alley door, likely hoping to escape before his employment records were subpoenaed. "Stop him," Julian commanded. Two burly line cooks, seeing a chance to perhaps curry favor, grabbed Kyle, pinning his arms behind his back. It was Marco. Kyle screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "And Eric, they made us do it. They said if we didn't turn tables fast enough, we'd be fired." The dishwasher was taking too long, so Marco rigged it himself. The dam had broken. The culture of fear that Marco had cultivated was now turning against him. This public betrayal was a final spark. Marco's eyes, wild and desperate, landed on a magnetic knife rack beside the grill. In one fluid, terrifying motion, he grabbed a heavy chef's knife, its polished steel glinting under the harsh kitchen lights. The room erupted into screams. Staff scrambled back, knocking over pans and trays. Nobody moves. Marco roared, waving the knife in a wide, unsteady arc. His chest heaved. "This is my house. You all get out. Get out." He was no longer a chef. He was a man having a psychotic break, his livelihood and freedom evaporating before his eyes. He stood between the inspectors and the only exit to the alley. Julian immediately stepped in front of Lena, his body becoming a shield. His calm professionalism didn't waver, but his eyes were locked on the blade, calculating every twitch of Marco's hand. "Marco, put the knife down," Julian said, his voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the chef's ragged breathing. "This is a health code violation. Right now, it's fines and maybe probation. You pick up that knife, and it becomes armed assault. You're looking at years in prison. Put it down." "Probation?" Marco spat, a crazed laugh escaping him. "You just call the police. My name will be everywhere. I'm finished either way." He took a step forward, the point of the knife aimed at Julian's chest. The two line cooks holding Kyle released him and backed away, their bravery evaporating in the face of a lethal threat. In that frozen, heart-pounding moment, Lena spoke from behind Julian. Her voice wasn't fearful. It was analytical, as if she was noting one final, critical violation. "The grill, Julian," she said, her voice clear and calm. "He left the gas on." Julian's eyes flickered for a split second. Behind Marco, the massive, open-flame grill was still roaring, its blue flames licking hungrily at the grease-laden air. Marco, in his rage, had stepped back, his body now dangerously close to the intense heat. It was a split-second decision. Julian didn't charge. He didn't try to be a hero. He simply took a firm step forward, his hands raised in a non-threatening posture, but his movement forced Marco to instinctively step back again to maintain the distance. Marco's heel caught on a loose floor tile. His arms flailed for balance. The hand holding the knife swung wildly back, directly into the path of the open grill flame. There was a sickening hiss and the smell of burning hair and fabric as the sleeve of his chef's jacket ignited. Marco screamed, a raw sound of pain and shock, dropping the knife with a clatter as he batted frantically at the flames crawling up his arm. It was over in seconds. Julian was on him, not to fight, but to help, using a nearby fire blanket to smother the flames. The two line cooks, seeing the knife on the floor, rushed back in to help pin the now sobbing, burned chef. As Julian secured the scene, the back alley door burst open. Two police officers rushed in, their hands on their sidearms, taking the chaotic scene. The subdued, weeping chef, the terrified staff, and the two impeccably calm inspectors standing amid the wreckage of a fine dining restaurant. The lead officer looked at Julian. "What's the situation?" Julian took a deep breath, the adrenaline finally beginning to recede. He looked at the ruined Marco, the petrified Eric, and the rigged dishwasher. "The situation," Julian said, his voice weary but resolute, "is that the public is now safe from this establishment. But this goes deeper than one chef's breakdown. Someone had to sign off on the repairs. Someone had to be paying off the previous inspectors." He looked from Eric to the now blank corporate binder. The fallout from Ciel Blanc was immediate and public. News vans surrounded the shuttered restaurant. Chef Marco faced charges of assault with a deadly weapon and criminal negligence. But as Julian predicted, this was just the beginning. The rigged dishwasher and systemic violations pointed to a deeper corruption. The official corporate owner was a shadowy LLC, but Julian and Lena's investigation, backed by the police and the health department's full authority, pierced the veil. The paper trail led to a powerful, respected figure, Harrison Vance, a city councilman and celebrated pro-business advocate who sat on the committee that oversaw municipal health code enforcement. Ciel Blanc was a secret, high-yield investment. Worse, their investigation revealed Vance had been bribing their predecessor, a now-retired inspector, for years to overlook violations. They had been sent to Ciel Blanc precisely because their reputations for integrity were well known. Someone at the health department had hoped they would fail to uncover the truth. Vance wasn't a cornered animal like Marco. He was a predator, and he fought back with the tools of power: lawyers, threats, and political influence. Julian and Lena were publicly smeared as overzealous, biased, and on a witch hunt against a successful businessman. A formal complaint was filed against them, alleging they had provoked the entire incident. The pressure was immense. Their director called them in, his expression grim. "He's demanding your suspension. The media is eating this up. Maybe you should take a paid leave until this blows over." "This won't blow over," Lena countered, her voice steel. "It will be swept under the rug. He'll reopen under a new name, and the cycle continues." "We have the evidence," Julian stated. "You have circumstantial evidence and the testimony of a terrified manager and a convicted chef," their director replied. "Vance's lawyers will shred it. Without a smoking gun, he'll walk." They needed that smoking gun. They knew Vance was meeting with his inner circle at his private, members-only club that night to plan his final counterattack. It was a fortress inaccessible to them, but they had an ally no one knew about, Chloe, the hostess, guilt-ridden and fearing prosecution. She had reached out, offering to help. She would be working the event. At 9 p.m., clad in black and armed with a hidden body wire and a compact camera, Chloe let them in through a service entrance. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the scent of old money. From a shadowed balcony overlooking a private dining room, they watched Vance hold court. "A temporary embarrassment," he was saying to his associates, a crystal glass of brandy in his hand. "We'll bury those two inspectors. My contact at the Journal are already running the story about their history of targeting minority-owned businesses." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Lena's hand tightened on her recorder. "Once their credibility is gone," Vance continued, We settled with the health department for a slap on the wrist. I've already got the funding to open Bistro Nouveau in the same location by fall. We'll even keep the same staff, minus the troublesome elements. One of his associates, a slick-haired developer, chuckled, "What about the dishwasher?" A cruel smile played on Vance's lips. "We'll install a new one. The old model was inefficient. Some sacrifices are necessary for profit." That was it. The admission, but it was their word against his. They needed more. Then Vance's phone rang. He answered, his voice booming with false warmth. "Madam Mayor, so glad you called." "Yes, a terrible misunderstanding. Absolutely. Those inspectors are a disgrace. I was just telling the group, we need a full audit of the health department's enforcement policies, root out this institutional bias." He was leveraging the incident to gut the very system designed to protect people. It was Julian who saw their chance. On a sideboard, next to a stack of financial reports, was Vance's open laptop. While Vance was distracted, charming the mayor, Julian gave Chloe a subtle nod. Moving with the server's invisible efficiency, she accidentally spilled a glass of water on the table near the laptop. In the ensuing flurry of napkins and apologies, she swiftly inserted a compact USB drive into a port. It was a keystroke logger. For 3 agonizing minutes, they waited, listening to Vance destroy their reputations. Then, Chloe retrieved the drive. Back at their car, they plugged it into a tablet. The data downloaded. It was a treasure trove. Encrypted emails detailing the bribery scheme for the old inspector, financial records showing deliberate underfunding of kitchen maintenance, and a damning message to Marco. Asterisk, just keep the plates moving. Handle the inspections. I'll handle the inspectors. Asterisk, they had him. The next day, at a press conference flanked by his lawyers, Harrison Vance stood before the media, playing the victim. This is a sad day for our city, when dedicated public servants like myself are targeted for political gain. He was mid-sentence when the doors at the back of the room swung open. Julian and Lena walked in, not in their inspector uniforms, but in formal attire. They were followed by the police chief and the district attorney. Vance's speech faltered. The DA stepped to the microphones. "Councilman Vance, you are under arrest for bribery, conspiracy, fraud, and endangerment of public health." Pandemonium erupted. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. Vance's face, once a mask of smug authority, collapsed into sheer, undiluted terror. He looked past the cameras, past the police, and his eyes locked with Julian's. Julian didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a nod of victory, but of finality. The guillotine had fallen. In the weeks that followed, the health department was overhauled. New, stricter protocols were established. Julian and Lena were given a commendation for integrity, but they refused a public ceremony. They sat in a small, family-run cafe, owned by a Haitian immigrant. The food simple, honest, and delicious. The owner treated them like royalty, not because of their badges, but because they were customers. Lena raised her coffee cup to public health. Julian clinked his mug against hers, and to the people we serve. Outside, the city was a little safer, a little more just. The system had worked, but only because 2 people had the courage to walk into the fire and force it to. If you have stayed with us to this point, then subscribe and share to join our fight for a just world. Stay tuned for what's next. The end.